Welcome to Think Tech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidel.
And I'm Maria Kashem.
In our show next time, we'll cover a program we did at the Plaza Club on September 27th called The Emerging Energy Also-Rans Are Also Important.
It was a very informative discussion about energy resources that have not yet come online or been commercialized in Hawaii.
First, we had opening remarks from Robbie Ahm, Executive Vice President of Hawaiian Electric.
Lesson number one from history. Never again can we allow ourselves to be as dependent on a single commodity. Never, ever, ever. We have to come up with a portfolio of energy resources that allow us to substantially spread the supply risk and the price risk. And that's part of our obligation as a community, and I hope everybody feels that way in this room. Lesson of history number two. Anytime we allow ourselves and our economy and our personal lives to be that dependent on an imported commodity, we put ourselves at unacceptable levels of risk. So not only can we not be on a single commodity, but we have to find a way not to have it be an import economy. So as we talk today, I think we should apply both standards to what we say. So first, we have to look at LNG as a fuel source. We have to. There is no other source in the near term, in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, that can provide the hedge against continued high oil prices at significant scale that LNG can. There's nothing. So unless we want to leave our economy in this condition for a lot longer period, we have to look at LNG. Of course, remembering our friend Santayana, we're looking at LNG because LNG is cheap, LNG is available, and LNG is American. So let's remember that we went down that path once before, and LNG is a useful part of the equation. But if anybody tries to make LNG the equation, we need to stop them, because that's simply repeating history, and at that point, we're all idiots. You know, and I appreciated the fact that Sasha Fesharaki, who is here today, wrote an article about LNG, very pro-LNG, but said in there, not LNG across the board. Not to replace any of our renewable goals with LNG. And I think for most of us, even if LNG plays a part, over time we want renewable energy to hopefully even take away that part. But in the near term, we believe LNG has a role to play. Secondly, and Jay mentioned this, we should be pushing forward with all the sources we have today on all of the various islands. And depending on the island you are, they are different resources. Waste to energy, geothermal, wind, solar, biomass, biofuels. Depending on the island you're on, you have a different set of those. Those are all commercially available, well-known, well-regarded technologies, and we need to do the best we can with each one of them. The third thing we need to do is get as many deals out there so that these things can happen. So we have a 200 megawatt RFP for renewable energy for Oahu, which will hopefully come out shortly. We have a 50 megawatt RFP for geothermal on the Big Island that will hopefully come out shortly. It will be followed by a 200 to 300 megawatt RFP for firm renewable on this island and a 25 to 50 megawatt RFP for firm renewable on Maui. We need to get deals out there, because until you put a contract in somebody's hands and then go get the financing for it and get an actual project going, we don't get energy on the grid, and we certainly don't get less expensive renewable energy on the grid. We're still stuck with oil and a lot of good thoughts. So we need those deals out there, and we need all of that energy to continue to grow as a hedge, both against price but against supply risk. Fourth, we need to see ourselves as all in this together. We need to cable the state together. The resources are very different dependent on the island, but we are all dependent on each other. If you look statewide, there is enough resource to probably take us off of oil, certainly by 2030, 2040, for electricity. But there's no way it's going to show up on Oahu unless there's a dramatic change in technology, with one exception, and that's on the panel today. Most of those other resources are not Oahu-centric resources. So if we can cable ourselves together, not only can we make use of the renewable energy on each island, we can back each other up from a reliability standpoint, and even then the short-term hedges like LNG can hedge statewide. Fifth, and finally, we need to make sure that we leave room for the emerging technologies. We have to make sure that the folks you're going to hear from today have the ability in order to be able to add to our mix, because they can add to it dramatically. And you're going to hear from some real good speakers about the role they believe they can play, where they are in their cycle, and what they think they can bring to Hawaii.
The panel discussion then followed. The panel included Adam Asquith of Kauai Farm Fuels, speaking for agro-biofuels, Heidi Kunle of Kunle Agrosystems, speaking for algae, Eric Mazutomi of Honolulu Seawater Air Conditioning, speaking, of course, for seawater air conditioning, Eileen O'Rourke of OTEC International in Baltimore, speaking for ocean thermal energy conversion, State Representative Cynthia Thielen, speaking for ocean and wave energy, and Mark Glick, our State Energy Administrator, on the big picture going forward.
This August, our residential electricity rates charged by Hawaiian Electric and its subsidiaries varied from 34 cents per kilowatt hour on Oahu to 46 cents per kilowatt hour on Lanai. That's pretty pricey. How would you like to take your utility bill and tear off 2/3? This would be what you would be paying when we tap the power in our ocean. We're literally surrounded by a renewable resource of power that can provide vastly more of the amount of electricity that we need to light up our islands at 1/3 of the cost. And I'm talking about wave energy. I'm talking about the surge and the power in the ocean. Wave energy, many of you may not know, is 95% constant, a 95% constant source. For that 5%, when it's not online, when it's not surging, you can use the NOAA forecast 24 to 48 hours out, and the utility will know when it has to make some adjustment.
As many of you know, OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion, harnesses the solar energy stored in the upper layers of the tropical oceans to produce electricity. Unlike intermittent renewables like wind and conventional solar, OTEC plants can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. OTEC provides base load power and can replace fossil fuel production. The concept of OTEC has been around for more than 120 years and was technically proven right there in Hawaii more than 30 years ago. It foundered in the 1980s, mainly due to the drop in oil prices and withdrawal of government support. OTEC International's technology is based on decades of research, beginning with the work of OTEC pioneer J. Hilbert Anderson, and since 2000, our own R&D. We understand that OTEC is a new integration of existing technologies that must be carefully designed and optimized to be economically feasible.
Our system, when it's completed, will have the ability to service over 60% of the commercial buildings in downtown Honolulu. And this is a very, very substantial project. It costs over $250 million to build, and it is being built totally privately. We enjoy no government subsidies, and as I said, it's totally privately funded. So how does it work? Quite simply, we take deep ocean seawater, 44-degree Fahrenheit seawater, from a source 4.5 miles out to sea, 1,800 feet deep. And we take that seawater and pass it through a series of heat exchangers, which in that process transfers the coolness of the seawater to fresh water that runs through a separate chilled water loop that we run through downtown Honolulu. And that chilled water is delivered to individual buildings and replaces the need for chillers and cooling towers in each of these individual buildings.
And basically, in my opinion, algae for liquid fuels is pre-commercial. This means that there's no, to my knowledge, there's no current operations that produce algae oils and parity with fossil fuel prices. However, algae still is reasonably sexy, and that is the drivers behind it in terms of not competing with food crops and not using drinking water to grow it, producing a lot more oil per land. All those things are still true, and algae models out as an excellent bioenergy crop for those reasons. So there's still a lot of excitement and money still going into it. Some of the progress that has been made in the last couple of years, we've seen it just recently this summer with the RIMPAC War Games, where they used almost close to 500,000 gallons of biofuels. The Navy paid about $26 a gallon for that, as opposed to about $4 a gallon to operate their Navy vessels and planes. But that's huge. I mean, algae played an important role in that biofuel composition. The year before, in 2011, I believe, is when algae biofuel became military certified to use as a 50-50 blend with fossil fuels for military use.
My word is Pono, and Pono has lots and lots of different meanings. The most common meaning we associate with it is righteousness, do the right thing, yeah? And we need to do the right thing in the big picture here. That's probably what we're all really seeking. It also has the meaning of balance, right? Seeking the balance. And if we do the right thing, right, we will achieve that balance. And that's the tie-in of those two definitions. There's another definition of the opposite of make-make. Make-make is what I need. I need a glass of water. Pono means, make-make is want. I want a drink of water. Pono also means need. So if we use that definition, it clarifies the difference between things we want and things we truly need. And I think we need to begin to focus on that in this larger discussion, particularly with regard to energy generation and the balance that concept of Pono pushes on us. So we need to start focusing on what we truly need rather than just what we think we want at the moment. With that said, where does that, thinking about the things that we need and how we got to this point, and the role that biomass and agrobiofuels can play, until we fully and completely harness the energy of the sun and the moon, if we can do that, we remain what we are going forward, and that is combustion junkies.
First of all, I want to say the Energy Office, we're about deploying clean energy solutions and really to improve the economy, improve jobs, create more jobs, income opportunities. And I think that's a fairly new focus because the initiative, I think, had started out primarily as something to improve the environment, which is a great goal, but we're looking at it from an economic standpoint, near-term high-impact solutions. And our role is to help deploy those solutions by being a strong supporter.
Clearly, the so-called also-rans are all very viable, and we appreciate you and are glad you could be part of this. I think it's real important to talk for just 1 second about the regulatory environment. I think Eric put his finger on it. The regulations are very important. We're all very happy to be held to a very high standard, but we've got to fix the process. The process is the hang-up, and it can be done, but it's going to take legislators like Cynthia that know both sides of the fence, that know the legislative process and know the challenges of getting alternative energies moving forward to help with that. And finally, still related to regulation, is the financing. You know, I'm convinced that when a venture capitalist or investor looks at these opportunities, I think they can be easily convinced that the technology risk is fairly low. The technology issues have been solved. It's the regulatory risk that puts them off.
The discussion was interesting and candid, and we learned a lot about the status of these various energy technologies, where they are going, when their developers expect they will be able to go online and onto the grid, and where they are going to fit into the larger landscape of renewable energy sources in Hawaii.
This is the future, as Eileen said, and I think the regulatory issues, though, make it very hard for anybody but the very biggest players.
but I also like that people were being very conscious about the externalities, the environmental benefits of moving beyond fossil fuels and moving into the renewable era.
I'm here from the government, and I'd like your comments.
This is the first time I've attended this event, and I enjoyed it very much and plan to come back again.
I'm really happy that we could do this and talk about the challenges as well as the potential. There's a tremendous amount of potential, but we've got to keep the momentum going. We can't just keep jumping around to the latest and greatest idea. We've got to keep all of these things moving forward.
And it really got me psyched to really look into the different portfolio options that are available for Hawaii. And specifically, I'm interested in wave energy, and having two panelists that were talking about wave energy and OTEC.
I'm more focused on transportation fuel because I think that's something that's missing in the equation. People are focusing a lot on the utilities and for providing electricity, but I think there's a huge gap in fuel, whether that's going to be electrical or hydrogen storage.
Jay, it was a wonderful event, and it was so exciting to hear about all of these different renewable technologies. They're going to succeed, and we are going to be a leader in the nation and in the world.
It was a great session. I think what Robbie summed it up, that we really have to be patient, that we really need to look at everything on the table.
I'm a hillbilly from Kauai, so I don't normally have exposure to these kind of high-level thinkers and movers and shakers, so I appreciate the opportunity, and it was an education for me too, because at the scale at which everybody is thinking with regard to energy production and financing and so forth. So thank you again for the opportunity. It was great. Yeah.
And thank you, Adam. Thanks for wearing shoes.
The also-rans, it starts out on a very negative connotation.
We wanted to provoke you.
And then when you understand that, and then you actually had, the big thinkers on the panel as well as more specific technologies, actually worked. I thought it worked out well as to try to defend that and be positive about it going forward. Yeah. So actually, it was very clever.
The problems that Hawaii is having in the energy field, and by that I mean all aspects of energy, are the problems people are having on the mainland trying to do any energy project. And an energy project today means a minimum of 4 or 5 years in permitting and lots of expenses and lots of patience, and hopefully the market will be there when the project is all permitted.
I thought it was interesting to see how well the seawater air conditioning is coming along. I would hope that the algae produces results in, I think the energy is a ways off, but I think it has other uses that are going to make it worthwhile for all of those companies.
Really highlighted some of the challenges, so hopefully the people in this room and the people on the panel can take those and improve things going forward, so we can hopefully see some of these technologies sooner rather than later.
Well, I don't think there are also-rans. I think there's a lot of real potential good projects in these technologies that need to be explored.
The also-rans are certainly also important to energy in Hawaii, and there is room for clean energy technology of every kind and nature in our portfolio. We, along with these also-ran developers, should be patient and continue to await the right moment for their emergence and success in the energy marketplace.
Clean energy is the most important initiative, and its success or failure will define our economy and thus our future. We must continue and redouble our efforts to move to renewables. We should move with alacrity and never lose sight of our need for self-reliance in this area.
And now let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech's 4 to 5 p.m. drive time radio series on KGU 760 AM continues this week. Tune in to 760 AM for Tech on Wednesday, Asia in Review on Thursday, and ThinkTech Fridays on Friday. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech Radio.
On October 25th, the Hawaii Venture Capital Association and ThinkTech will present a luncheon panel program called Is UH Meeting Its Technology Research Goals?, featuring Chancellor Tom Apple and a panel of his deans at UH Manoa. Sign up for these programs at hvca.org.
And now here's Bill Spencer, President of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, with this week's Spensation.
So the university is, besieged, beleaguered right now. And this is actually a perfect time for us to do our next program on the university, Bill.
Well, they're certainly in the news, and their accreditation committee had some good things to say about them, especially the amount of R&D funding that has been brought in the last couple of years. I think they're vested with coming up with some plans for the state on innovation, and there's an innovation council doing something somewhere.
We're going to find out more about that. We're going to find out about the Innovation Council and what it's doing in the last couple of years and how well it's doing and what it's planning. We haven't heard much about it, but now we will. We'll find out about OTED, the Office of Technology Transfer at the university, which hasn't been doing much either in the last few years, which is supposed to help university researchers commercialize their discoveries. And we'll talk to some of the deans up there, the deans who are interested, who are the primary drivers of tech research. So we're calling the program is UH Meeting Its Tech Research Goals. And we'll have Chancellor Tom Apple there as part of the panel. So we'll have him and the tech research deans, I call them, including, of course, Peter Crouch of the School of Engineering, to talk about what they're doing in the way of tech research. I suppose they'll talk about their grants, but also they'll talk about whether we can become, or at least go in the direction of Stanford in terms of developing technology that will earn money for the university in the way of royalties. Seems like a long way to go. Seems like it hasn't been happening, but we'll get a handle on what these guys are doing and what we can expect in the future.
Well, we've known for a long time that tech centers grow up around quality universities that are doing groundbreaking research, that are commercializing that research at some level. Although even Stanford, the amount of revenue that they get from commercialization of IP is really not that high. And in fact, their director of OTED, I don't think they call it that, but their director said that they've actually gotten more money in donations from the two guys that invented Google than the revenues from their IP rights.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an important concept, though. If our universities can breed entrepreneurs or breed technology that can be commercialized and build companies and make entrepreneurs rich and their investors rich, then the university will thrive through donations, and it'll be a complete circle.
Yeah, sure, one way or the other, whether it's by royalties or by donations from successful entrepreneurs. The university will benefit for having been the seminal, venue for the development of the technology. We have to do that, and we have to encourage. There was a bumper sticker back in the early part of the decade, which read, "Have you hugged your UH researcher today?" And it bespoke of a time when Bishop Street and the entrepreneurs here were closer with the researchers at the university. I think that slipped a little. And hopefully, this discussion will lead to other discussions, which hopefully will, allow us to resume the relationship that we had hoped for back a few years ago. I think the university I agree with you, the university is the key to developing a tech industry. And once we get that going, we'll have a much better track on the development of that industry.
I think the other thing that we can look forward to is with all the energy going into accelerator programs and startup and innovation and incubation. There will hopefully be a crossover that will help create a culture of entrepreneurship that's been lacking at the university. You know, lots of IP there, but not a lot of energy to try and do something with it.
Yeah, so that's why the connection is the intersection. When you bring them together is so important because it stimulates activity on both ends. So thanks to Tom Apple, Chancellor, for having agreed to this and helping us set it up and being part of it. He came into a maelstrom of activity as soon as he arrived, and hopefully this will help him get settled finally.
And introduce him to our business community.
Right. What a great thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jay.
We do good work.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of Think Tech. But first, we want to thank our underwriters.
Thanks to the Scheidler Family Foundation, which supports a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including Think Tech.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates MECO on Maui and Helco on the Big Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is the Senior Executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company, and CEO of CBI Polymers, a tech company in Hawaii.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cooke, Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Okay, Maria, that wraps up this week's edition of Think Tech. Remember, you can watch Think Tech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Maria does. For additional times, check out OC16.tv.
You bet, Jay. For lots more Think Tech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on Think Tech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a sponsor or a volunteer and help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Jay Fidel. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode. Aloha, everyone.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.